Hi there. I thought I would take just a few minutes to talk with you about what I think is the greatest danger posed by a Clinton presidency, something which is very clear if you look at the various WikiLeaks emails from different staff people. Before I get to that, I should say that Clifton and I are in California. We are going to have a great book signing tonight at Mira Mesa near La Jolla in the San Diego area. We're going to also be at the Nixon Library this week and at the Reagan Library this week. And we look forward to seeing our many friends in the West Coast. Tonight is at 7 o'clock at Barnes & Noble in Mira Mesa. So any of you who are in the area, if you have friends who live in the San Diego area, send them an email or give them a call. I've been reading a lot of these WikiLeaks, a huge number of them. And as I read them, what hit me was the ruthlessness, the arrogance, the nastiness of the various staff people. And it began to make me realize that the greatest danger from a Clinton presidency isn't the corruption of Bill and Hillary, which will be, frankly, astonishing and will threaten to undermine the entire American system and put us in a position to resemble Venezuela. And as dangerous as that is, I don't think that's the greatest danger. The greatest danger is the kind of people they will appoint. Now, I've talked a lot about the Supreme Court, and we all realize that a Clinton Supreme Court isn't about the next 4 years. It could be about the next 40 years if she gets to appoint 3 or 4 Supreme Court justices, and that the gap between who Hillary Clinton would appoint, left-wing radicals, secularists, people who are anti-religion, people who are against the Second Amendment, people who don't frankly believe in the Constitution because they think it's a middle-class bourgeois obsolete idea. That's the kind of people she'd appoint. On the other hand, it's very clear that Trump would appoint people in the tradition of Supreme Court Justice Scalia, constitutionalist conservatives, people who reverence the founding fathers and the very concept of the rule of law. Huge gap there. But we knew about that, and it's a very, by itself, maybe as big an argument as most people need to vote for Trump and against Clinton. But then I began to look at these emails, and I really recommend to you to go through some of them and get a feel for them. One thing which has already been very public is the anti-Catholic bigotry. And you get this again and again in a series of emails in which they suggest that the Catholic Church is medieval, it's obsolete, it needs to change. And then as a throwaway line, they're even more hostile to Protestant fundamentalists than they are to Catholics. So the hint I got there is they're going to appoint the kind of people who are a direct threat to freedom of religion. And when you realize that there is now in Massachusetts a transgender commission that is seriously listed as one of its assignments to look at the language used in church to make sure that it is gender appropriate. Makes me wonder if they're going to say that Our Father can no longer be used as the beginning of the Lord's Prayer because it doesn't fit the radical ideas of the secularists. But these things are all happening all across the country. They're happening on university campuses. They're happening in newsrooms. And now, as I said, you see in the Massachusetts Commission, the use of the state to impose on the rest of us a radical value system, whether we like it or not. Well, clearly, if you look at some of these emails, those are the kind of people that Hillary Clinton would rely on. Then you get to the question about defending us from danger. And I really thought that the specific email in which John Podesta, her top person, a man who's been around a long time in the Obama administration, the Clinton administration, now the Clinton campaign, in which Podesta says, gee, isn't it unfortunate that the killer in San Bernardino doesn't have a name that's sort of Anglo-Saxon? You look at that thing and you think, what's the underlying mindset that would lead you to say that? And the answer is simple. They are so opposed to dealing head-on with the issue of Islamic supremacists. They're so opposed to dealing with Islamic radical terrorists that it's painful to them to have a crime committed by somebody who clearly fits the model that most Americans think is true. That crime, of course, could be the bombing in New York. It could be the killer at the nightclub in Orlando. It could be the Army psychiatrist at Fort Hood. Again and again, left-wingers like Podesta are disappointed because it turns out that these are not conservatives. These are not right-wing radicals. They are, in fact, representatives of a Islamic supremacist movement that is worldwide and that wants to replace our civilization with a religious dictatorship of their own design, which they would impose. And you get this when you start reading these emails and thinking about them, putting them together. You also get this tremendous arrogance about just ignoring the law. We discovered it today with Patrick Kennedy, who should be fired from the State Department. Patrick Kennedy already had a bad reputation because of his key role in failing to provide security to Benghazi. There were some 600 requests from Libya for more help. That's not that particular day, but over a 5 or 6 month period, there were literally 600 requests. And where were they stopped? They were stopped in the State Department. And who was the number one person stopping them? Patrick Kennedy. Now we discover that he apparently offered a quid pro quo to the FBI, saying, in effect, if you'll reclassify these things, we might be able to find a few more slots overseas for you to put FBI agents. Quid pro quos, by the way, are a felony. It's illegal. And you can't offer something for something in that kind of decision-making. But, of course, they already announced that they're going to keep him because why would this administration care about breaking the law? You discover more examples. They had a big argument about whether or not to accept money from lobbyists who represented foreign governments. And they even had a list of, people from a variety of dictatorships. And after 3 or 4 days of arguing, they decided, oh, sure, let's take the money. And again, it gave you a flavor. You have the example we've now learned of the $1 million birthday gift from Qatar for Bill Clinton. And all they wanted was to have 5 minutes with the former president as they delivered the $1 million. We've discovered more and more about how much they were selling access to the Secretary of State's office, access to the White House. And notice, this isn't all Hillary in the sense that she's sitting there doing it. These are the people she trusts. These are the things she's willing to have people do in her name. And you see it come up again and again and again. You also have to ask yourself, what kind of people would rip off Haitians? I mean, Haitians are among the poorest people in the entire Western Hemisphere. And yet we now know from email after email after email that their first concern wasn't to get $10 billion of aid to help Haiti. Their first concern was to help their friends of Bill, loot the money. When you think about what kind of people would rip off the poorest people in the Western Hemisphere, it's really bizarre. And then we learn that while Hillary Clinton says she's for a $15 minimum wage in the U.S., in Haiti, the Secretary of State's office opposed raising the Haitian minimum wage from $3 a day to $5 a day, not an hour, from $3 a day to $5 a day. Now, is it any surprise you see jobs going overseas when people can be paid $3 a day as compared to $15 an hour? But now in the last day or so, I noticed there is a new example where Cheryl Mills, who was her chief of staff, was involved in a company which really liked Ghana because think about the following sentence. It's 23 cents an hour minimum wage was so much better than neighboring countries that were more expensive. Can you imagine being happy that you're exploiting people for 23 cents an hour? And can you imagine how many American jobs get shipped overseas by people like Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton who are prepared to help industrialists open up new factories in order to take American jobs away, in order to rip off poor people in the third world, in order to get even richer? And you see this coming up in these emails again and again and again. I'm actually working with a team trying to sort out, there's so many pieces to this, the Wikipedia stuff, that it's almost unimaginable how bad it is, how many different areas it goes into, what has to be done in order to have some real understanding, not just of individual absurdities or individual outrages, but what's the total overall problem and how do we deal with it. It's really something we have to work on as we get it better understand, better organized. Excuse me. As we get better organized, I will report back to you in a much more detailed way. I may even do a series of Facebook Lives walking you through Wikipedia. It's my teacher background, I actually believe in organizing these things, putting them together. And so if I can get it worked out so it's good enough and it's worth your while, I may do a series of introductory talks on step-by-step understanding what we're learning from Wikipedia. It is exposing the news media. It is exposing the Clinton team. It is giving you a real sense of how the government works. And it's pretty astonishing. One of the emails that came out just today is of a Citibank executive who in October of 2008, a month before the election, had already outlined everybody who would end up in the Obama cabinet. You want some sense of how important the big banks are to the Democrats? Citibank gets the most money of any bank in the bailout. And here's somebody at Citibank outlining who Obama will have in his cabinet, and he gets it 100% right. Now that tells you how tightly tied the big banks, the big politicians, and big government are, and how much they're a conspiracy against the rest of us. And as we dig through more of these things, we find more and more examples. Let me talk about one last thing, which is the firebombing in North Carolina. I thought it was a great irony that when I was on ABC on Sunday morning, I was asked about the dangers of Trump's supporters, and they had two people on who said fairly dumb things, frankly. And I'm against people making charges or suggesting the kind of things they were suggesting, but they were words. A few hours later, a Republican headquarters in North Carolina was firebombed. Now, it was clearly not firebombed by Republicans, but you have yet to hear some huge media outcry about the kind of Democrats who would firebomb a headquarters, about the effort to intimidate Republicans against going to local campaign headquarters. And now we have, as I talked earlier today with Sean Hannity for his radio show, and I think we're going to talk about it again this evening when I'm going to do his TV show from Mira Mesa, Barnes & Noble. There now is a report of over a year of underground investigation of a Democratic group tightly coordinated with Clinton, deliberately set up to go around and cause trouble at Donald Trump rallies. I really recommend that you look at the video of that group, that you think about it. They are so frightened of an outsider winning, particularly of a conservative outsider winning, that they are going all out to try to stop him. Finally, let me remind you how totally, unendingly biased the elite media is. When you learn that Friday a week ago, they spent 23 minutes, the three television network shows, spent 23 minutes on Donald Trump's 11-year-old tape, which is a stupid tape, which I've condemned, and Krista and I both said we found absolutely, totally unacceptable. But they spent 23 minutes on it between the three TV networks. They spent 57 seconds, all three combined, spent 57 seconds on the WikiLeaks, including Hillary Clinton's dream, that's her word, dream of a Western Hemisphere without borders, which would mean 600 million people could come to the United States, including cocaine dealers from Colombia, MS-13 violent gang members from El Salvador, and Mexican drug cartels. Somehow, concept of an open border for somehow, I saw that we just had a break there. Somehow that concept of an open border for 600 million people wasn't as important as an 11-year-old tape. And if you want a case study in bias, imagine that all three networks together somehow magically made the decision to give 23 minutes out of their evening news to beating up on Donald Trump. And between the three of them, 57 seconds about Hillary Clinton's various speeches and comments. And then you'll understand what an amazing fact it is that just a few minutes ago, CNN reported that in 4 different very competitive states, Trump is either ahead or within the margin of error in every poll, despite a week of total, endless, negative attack by the media. So I think people are getting smarter. They're going to realize that the media is the left, the media is Clinton, the media is identified as the opponent of average, everyday Americans, and I think that's going to have one of the great shocking effects on Election Day. So we'll report on more things in the near future. Again, if you know anybody who's near the Mira Mesa Barnes & Noble at 7 o'clock tonight, California time, have them drop by. Callista's going to be there with her brand new book, Hail to the Chief, in which Ellis the Elephant introduces 4 to 8-year-olds to the American presidents. And I'll be there with my new novel, Treason, about the real challenge if we end up with some Americans who are loyal to ISIS, but in important positions at the FBI or the Department of Homeland Security. So thank you for participating in this Facebook Live.